In this video, I'm going to talk all about bassoon Bocals, or if you're from across the pond, bassoon crooks. The Bocal is a really important part of the bassoon, and it can make or break your bassoon playing. So stick around to learn more about Bocals, the different types of Bocals that there are, and how to find and purchase new Bocals if you're in the market for buying a new Bocal. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Natalie Law, and I'm a professional bassoonist and bassoon teacher, and I love to help people just like you learn how to play the bassoon and improve your skills. So if that's a topic of interest to you, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and make sure you check out some of my other videos that might help you out in your bassoon journey. So let's talk about the Bocal for a second. The Bocal is an extremely important part of playing the bassoon. The Bocal will honestly make or break your bassoon playing. You can be the best bassoonist in the world, but if you have a bad Bocal, you're going to sound like a complete beginner. And consequently, if you don't have a very good bassoon, but you have a nice Bocal on it, that can make that bassoon sound a lot better. So the Bocal is a really important part of playing the bassoon. So I just want to give you a couple quick tips on how to handle the Bocal so that you avoid damaging it. The Bocal is made of a really soft metal usually that is very prone to damage, very easy to bend, very easy to dent. Even just a gentle bump into the Bocal can cause a small dent, and that can really affect the sound and how your bassoon feels to play. Whenever you're putting your bassoon together, you don't want to put the Bocal in like this, because what happens is you're putting pressure to get the Bocal into the bassoon, and you could end up bending it or denting it slightly while getting it in. You always want to put pressure on the actual curve of the Bocal and not on the straight part of the Bocal, because the curved part has more strength to it and it's not going to bend as easily as this part. You generally want to avoid walking around with your bassoon when your Bocal's in it like this, like normal, because if you're holding it and this part can easily bump into objects, it can easily bump into people. It can get bent very easily, especially if you have to walk a long distance. And so what you can do is put the Bocal in the bell of your bassoon. Make sure that you blow out any condensation before you do that so it doesn't drip down into your bassoon, but you can put it into the bell of your bassoon. You can also just hold it separately because I don't like to have it rattling around in the top of my bassoon. And one of the reasons why we want to be so protective of the Bocal is not just because it bends easily, but it's also very expensive. Even a low-end, cheap entry model Bocal is going to be several $100s at least. And most better quality Bocals and professional Bocals, those are going to be closer to $1,000 or several $1,000s depending on the type of Bocal that you're getting. They're not cheap to replace, and they have such an effect on the bassoon that, you know, when that even just a tiny little dent is made in your Bocal, it can affect everything on the instrument. And so it's just so important that we really take care of the Bocal and we handle it with as much care as possible. There are lots and lots of different types of Bocals they're different lengths, and they're plated with different types of metal, and they have different looking curves in them. There's some Bocals that have barely any curve at all and are more like straight. There's all sorts of different types of Bocals. And so the kind of the most basic way that defines different Bocals is their length. And they're defined by a number. Usually they're a 1, a 2, or a 3. Sometimes you might have a 4 length or a 0 length Bocal. Although those are less common. Kind of the standard length of Bocal is a number 2 Bocal, but you might be playing on a number 1 or a number 3, and that can be common as well. The number just indicates how long it is in relation to the other numbers, because it varies from brand to brand. I play on a Heckel Bocal that I purchased with my Heckel bassoon, and it is a 2-length Bocal. This is a 2-length Bocal, and so if I got the exact same Bocal but got a 3-length Bocal, it would, if I put them side by side, the 3-length would extend just a little bit. And consequently, if I got a number one length Bocal of the same exact kind, and I put it next to this Bocal, it would be a little bit shorter. And the numbers usually indicate on Bocals the length, and so that consequently affects the pitch. It can affect other things as well too. You get having different lengths of Bocals can also affect tone, and so you might find that not only is your pitch affected, but the tone is affected, especially if you listen back to a recording of yourself. It gets confusing because if you mix different brands of Bocals, so I have a Heckle Bocal, but if I put this next to a number 2 Fox Bocal, the length wouldn't be the exact same. There's no standard length across brands. The numbers relate to how long the Bocal is, but it's only relative to that same brand or that same model of Bocal. Just keep in mind that if you're looking at different brands of Bocals, that those lengths are going to vary pretty drastically between different brands. You'll want to make sure that if you're trialing Bocals, that you get several different lengths of the same model of Bocal, same brand, same model of Bocal, so that you know how they all affect your playing differently. Bocals are also made with different metals or different types of metals, and so the different types of metals are going to affect your sound differently. And so it just takes experimenting with those different Bocals to figure out what you're looking in your sound. A lot of professional bassoonists have more than one Bocal, and it's a good idea to have at least 2 in your case because they're so easily damaged that if someone stepped on your Bocal, that you'd have one as a backup ready to go because they're so easy to damage. Or for me, in certain situations, I have my kind of standard go-to Bocal, and I have another Bocal in my case that plays high notes a little bit better. So I keep that on hand when I have pieces that require a lot of high register playing. It's just a little bit easier to play, but I wouldn't want to use that Bocal as my standard go-to Bocal because I don't love the sound and the intonation on it as much, but it does make high notes a little bit easier to play. Bocals can be a nice way to upgrade your instrument. If you're playing on a lower quality instrument, but you want to improve your sound, just get a little bit nicer Bocal, and it'll probably improve your playing quite a bit without having to purchase a whole new bassoon. And you don't necessarily have to stick to the same brand of Bocal as you do as your bassoon. So I happen to have a Heckle bassoon and a Heckle Bocal, but there are a lot of people who will play on Fox bassoons and they have a Heckle Bocal, or they play on a Heckle bassoon and they have a Leitzinger Bocal, or they have some other brand of bassoon that's different than their Bocal because they happen to find that Bocal, the way it sounds on that bassoon, just sounds really good and they like that combination. So don't feel like you have to stick to the same brand of Bocal as your bassoon when you're searching for new Bocals. One other tip that I want to make sure I talk about because it's often a misconception with Bocals is we can't adjust our tuning with Bocals. So a lot of instruments you can push the mouthpiece in or out or change something on the instrument to make it slightly longer or slightly shorter to change the pitch. Some people think that you can do that on the bassoon, but you can't. Technically, you can have the Bocal of the bassoon pull out or pushed in, but the problem is you have to have the pip on the Bocal line up with the whisper key pad, and that's a very small amount of space to be able to move. And the other problem is if you do adjust your Bocal length a little bit, then you run into issues where the Bocal is too loose on the bassoon and you aren't able to play. And so you want to fit your Bocal as far as it will go comfortably. There might be a little bit of cork sticking out at the top. That's okay as long as this pip is lining up with the whisper key pad and the Bocal is sitting in there stable and not moving around, then you're in a good spot and you shouldn't be moving it for tuning. So oboe and bassoon don't change anything with our tuning. It's all in our reeds. And so if your reed is playing particularly sharp on a particular day, you just have to change it in your playing or get a new reed that plays in tune to be able to adjust your tuning. So if someone says adjust the height of the Bocal on your bassoon to change the pitch, that's totally wrong. It's a misconception and I hear it a lot, but you can't really change the pitch. And even if you do change it, just the amount of the whisper key width, it it makes such a small difference, it's not worth it anyways. So there's really not a whole lot you can do changing tuning on the bassoon. So I just want to mention that while we're talking about vocals, since it's such a common misconception. So I want you to consider a couple things before you immediately jump to the conclusion that you need a new Bocal. So before you go buying a new Bocal, have you tried different reeds? The issue or issues that you're experiencing, do they happen on all of your reeds or just some of your reeds? Because often reeds can be a culprit if you're experiencing an issue. If you've been getting the same reed for a long time and you start experiencing an issue, maybe try another reed from somewhere else or someone else to try something else out, just to make sure that you're experiencing the same issue on multiple reeds. Because reeds, just as much as Bocals, can affect your playing so much. So try different reeds. If your bassoon, if you've all of a sudden noticed some issues with your bassoon playing, like certain things feel really wacky to play or out of tune, especially if it's something that, didn't used to be an issue, I would get your bassoon serviced if you can. Sometimes if something is changing in your playing, it can indicate that something's wrong with your bassoon. It needs to be maintenance. It needs to be cleaned. I experienced this one time on a previous bassoon that just sort of gradually, it wasn't all of a sudden, but just sort of gradually I started noticing that certain notes didn't want to settle well and they weren't fully sitting in tune and they were a little bit hard to play, and all of a sudden I was like, what's going on? And again, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was it gradually kind of got worse over a couple months, and I wasn't sure what was happening because I hadn't experienced that before. And then I took my bassoon, I happened to take it in for an overhaul, and there was actually some rot in the bottom of my bassoon, and it was an issue with how I was swabbing the instrument. And because of that experience, now I am very meticulous about swabbing my bassoon because I never want that to happen again. But that issue was something that happened gradually over time and that had to be fixed. And so that was a bassoon issue. So really make sure that you factored out that you're not having reed issues and you're not having instrument issues before you decide that you ultimately need a new Bocal. And if you're a beginner, if you're within your first year or two of playing bassoon, I would not try to buy a new Bocal. Even if you're playing on a subpar Bocal right now, I would just stick it out and try to get better at the bassoon as much as you can before you invest in getting a new Bocal, because you want to have some experience on the bassoon to kind of know what you're looking for, what you struggle with, what you would like to be easier. It's good to have that experience before you just go buy a Bocal. And that's pretty good advice, whether you're buying a Bocal or whether you're buying a bassoon as well, is you want to know what you're looking for before you buy the instrument, right? I would also recommend, maybe instead of going out and buying Bocals, if you have friends that play bassoon or there's other instruments around that you can maybe just borrow a Bocal for a little bit and see, what a different Bocal feels like before you invest into trying to buy a new Bocal. See if you can borrow one, and that also gives you an idea. You can maybe try some different Bocals and see if one of them seems to work well for you, and maybe you could purchase a Bocal like that. I really would only recommend buying a new Bocal if you feel like your Bocal specifically is holding you back. If you feel like maybe you've tried another Bocal at another point, it was just so much easier to play something, and you feel like your Bocal is the thing that's sitting between you and where you want to go on the bassoon. So if you feel like you've reached that point, then I would say investing in a new Bocal is worth it. I just want to make sure that you've considered all these different possible factors and influences into this decision to buy a new Bocal, because it is an investment, and you want to make sure that whatever Bocal you get, that it's the right Bocal for you and your setup. You don't want to buy a Bocal, even though you can turn around and sell it. It's kind of a pain to buy it and then realize, maybe I didn't really need this, Just consider all of those factors before you decide that you actually need a new Bocal. So I want to talk about some further tips for buying Bocals. As I mentioned before, you can have a set of Bocals shipped to you to trial from a certain retailer, and then you try them out for a period of time, and then you send back what you don't want. That's kind of the typical way to do it. If you do happen to go to a conference like IDRS or which is the International Double Reed Society Conference, or any other double reed conferences where there's vendors at the event, They will often bring Bocals. Instrument vendors will often bring Bocals that you can try right then and there. And that's a good place to kind of get a general broad overview. If you do go to a conference like that where you're trying Bocals out like with the vendor in person, I personally wouldn't want to purchase a Bocal that way because I'm not getting a full sense of what the Bocal really feels like and how it sounds in all of my playing. I might get a sense of what types of Bocals that I like and maybe one that I want to try further, but I wouldn't want to purchase it right then and there. I'd want to have that vendor send me the Bocal to trial for a period of time and see how it does in a variety of situations when I'm not in the pressure of a live environment with people trying to sell me things. And when you get a shipment of Bocals to try, you need to try them out in a variety of different situations. You want to try them out in your personal practice, and you want to try them out in different types of music. So try them out with different etudes, try them out with different solos, try them play a bunch of different scales and fundamental exercises on the bassoon. Try all these different things with that Bocal and see how it does in certain situations. You may find that it's great in every situation except when you play high notes. It's not that great, which is the case for me and my Bocal. I love my Bocal, but it doesn't play high notes very well. So when I have to do high note playing, I pull out my other Bocal, and that's how I solve that problem. You won't find that unless you're really putting the Bocal through all the different situations that you need to play. Not only do you want to play by yourself in your own practice sessions, you want to bring your Bocal to ensemble. So if you play in any sort of ensemble, whether it be a band or an orchestra, or maybe in a small chamber group, you want to bring that new Bocal to those situations, try it out, and you want to ask the people around you, how does this sound? Did you notice a difference in my playing? Ask people to listen to you. And not only just right within the ensemble setting, see if someone will listen to you in the hall. So maybe play a solo in the hall that you're playing in, or in a bigger room that you're playing in where there's a little bit more resonance. Have someone listen to you as if they were in the audience and give you feedback and go through the different Bocals and see what they hear, because they will probably hear different things in your playing than what you will hear in your own playing when you're right there playing it. You also want to record yourself, especially when you're in those situations where you're playing into a hall with some resonance. You want to record yourself and hear what you sound like. You're going to hear what someone in the audience might hear, and you might, again, hear something different than what you hear when you're playing it. Feeling how something feels to play and how something sounds to play sometimes don't line up. Even if it feels great to play, but it doesn't quite sound the sound that you want. You want something that feels good to play, it's easy to play, but it also gets the sound that you want. So you're also, as you're checking for the sound in these Bocals, you're also checking to see how easy is it to play in all registers on my instrument? How easy is it to play staccato versus legato? How easy is it to play harsh accents? How easy is it to play forte versus piano? You're going to try in all these different contrasting situations to see what does the Bocal do in all of those situations. You may find a Bocal that really doesn't allow you to project as much. And if you're looking to project a little bit more, you might need a different Bocal, even if it feels great to play. So when you are ready to buy a Bocal, make sure you have it planned out that when you get the shipment of Bocals shipped to you from the retailer, that you get them at a time when you're going to be in these different situations and you have time to really evaluate the Bocal. Don't get it at a time when there's not a whole lot going on and you're not doing a whole lot of playing. Do it when you know that you're going to get different experiences on it. You can get different people to listen to it. Maybe ask them in advance, hey, I'm going to order some Bocals. Do you mind listening to me? If you have a teacher, which I recommend that you do get a teacher if you can, have a teacher listen to you on that Bocal, and they'll be able to walk you through different things to try on it and see how it sounds. And in that same vein of having a teacher, even if you don't have a teacher that you're working with, if you can somehow get with a professional bassoonist who can listen to you and you ask, hey, I'm thinking about buying this Bocal. Do you know anything about this Bocal? Have you heard good things, bad things? Do you know anything about it? Because sometimes if you talk to a professional bassoonist who's maybe tried it before, they may say, that Bocal felt really great at first, but then I ran into all these problems when I was playing. Or they might say, I haven't played that Bocal, but I have a friend who really likes those Bocals and I've heard good things. So it's good to get input from different people, even if, you don't normally talk to those people, you don't normally have a teacher. It's good to get a lot of different input, because getting a new Bocal is a big investment, not just financially, but also, once you get a Bocal, it really changes your playing. So you want to make sure that you've considered all the factors, even all the bad factors that maybe you don't want to think about. You want to consider all those factors into buying the Bocal. There's no universal type of Bocal that works for everybody. There's there's really amazing bassoonists out there who play on completely different Bocals and they both sound great. So it really has to do with your instrument, your reeds, your playing setup. That's another topic with reeds, is that you don't want to get a Bocal that is going to force you to have to change the type of reeds that you play on. So whether you're making your own reeds or whether you're purchasing reeds from someone, if you feel like you're having to make a lot of adjustments to the reed or the reed's just not working, I wouldn't recommend buying a Bocal that's going to force you to have to make a lot of changes in your reeds or in your playing to make it work. You want to find a Bocal that fits you and your playing. The same goes for bassoons too, whether you're buying a Bocal or a bassoon, which buying a bassoon is a whole other topic with a lot of other factors into it. But I will say, similar to that, when I was searching for bassoons, I was specifically looking for Heckel bassoon in a certain range of serial numbers, and I tried a dozen different Heckel bassoons all within that serial number, and they were all very, 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 very different. Some of those instruments, even though they were amazing instruments and very expensive, I sounded horrible on them. And, at that point when I was searching for my now current bassoon, I had, I was in my master's program, and so I had, quite a bit of experience playing bassoon and kind of knew what I was looking for. But it just goes to show that, not every single piece of equipment out there is going to fit you. And, I will say that when I came to my bassoon and then eventually I chose the Bocal to go with it, it just felt so easy to play. I didn't have to make a lot of changes. Yes, it was an adjustment, but I just knew within a few minutes of playing it that was just like, oh, this is just easy. I'm not having to work really hard to make a new sound. It sounds beautiful. I knew right away that I had found the right equipment for me and my setup. The other hard thing with trialing a batch of Bocals at a time is that you're only trialing that batch of Bocals within that batch. And so the Bocals all may be, bad Bocals for you, and you choose the best one out of that batch. But maybe if you had gotten another batch of Bocals, it would have been better for you. And so that's why recording yourself and having other people listen to you can be really helpful, because if you get, a second batch or a third batch of Bocals to try, you can go back and listen to recordings or ask people what they thought of those Bocals, and actually reference, which Bocals from which batches were the best. And if, you're playing a bunch of Bocals, but none of them really feel great, don't be pressured into buying one. You don't want to make the investment to buy a Bocal until you feel really good about it. So don't be afraid to take your time, keep trying different batches of Bocals, try different brands, different models, different lengths of Bocals. And keep notes. If you're trying a lot of Bocals, keep notes of that process, what you like, what you don't like, what, is there any common patterns that you're noticing? Like these types of Bocals I notice that I don't like. Maybe I like this brand of Bocal so far, but I don't know if I love these models. Maybe if I just try a different model of the Bocal. There's so many different types of Bocals out there, and it can be really overwhelming to find the right one for you. But just be patient with it, trial and error, record your process for testing the Bocals, have people listen to you, try it in different spaces, different types of playing, and eventually you'll find a Bocal that you want to buy. I hope this video was helpful for you and gave you some good information on Bocals and how to buy a Bocal and some basic tips on handling Bocals. If it was, give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And let me know down in the comments, are you in the market for trying to find a new Bocal? Do you know if you should buy a new Bocal? What questions do you have about Bocals?